When you picture a German tank killer from World War II, you probably think of a monster, a giant of steel, something like the Jagdtiger or the Elephant, packing a massive cannon that could smash just about anything on the battlefield. They were supposed to be the masterpieces of German engineering, untouchable, unstoppable forces. But what if I told you Germany's most lethal tank hunter wasn't a giant at all? It was this, the Jagdpanzer 38, better known as the Hetzer. It was a small, cheap, and often overlooked vehicle. Born from pure desperation on the brutal Eastern Front, the Hetzer would prove that in the war's final years, being small, reliable, and numerous was far deadlier than being big. This is the story of how a crisis forced Germany to abandon its obsession with wonder weapons and create a machine that, for all its flaws, would become their most effective tank destroyer. To really get the Hetzer, you have to understand the sheer disaster Germany was facing on the Eastern Front. By 1943, Germany was trapped in a brutal war of attrition it just couldn't win. The initial shock of Operation Barbarossa had long since faded, replaced by the grim reality of facing a seemingly endless flood of Soviet men and machines. The Soviet T-34 and KV-1 tanks had already given the Germans a nasty shock back in '41, making a lot of their anti-tank guns and even their own tanks pretty much useless. This crisis forced German anti-tank doctrine to evolve, and fast. The early days of the war saw clumsy, stopgap solutions, like the Panzerjäger 1. This was basically an old Panzer I chassis with its turret ripped off, and a captured Czech 4.7-centimeter anti-tank gun mounted in a thinly armored, open-topped box. It was a desperate move that gave the gun some mobility, but offered the crew almost no protection. The Martyr series came next, putting the powerful 7.5-centimeter PaK 40 gun on various captured French and Czech tank chassis. These were better. They could kill T-34s at a distance, but they were still compromises. They were tall, their fighting compartments were wide open to the sky, and the crews were horribly vulnerable to artillery, shrapnel, and even rifles. They were a necessary evil, a temporary fix for a problem that was only getting worse.
As the war dragged on, German industry, for all its reputation of efficiency, just couldn't keep up. For every Panther or Tiger tank Germany managed to build, the Allies were churning out 7 or 8 of their own. That numerical disadvantage was a death sentence. German panzer divisions were being bled dry, and replacing their advanced, complex tanks was becoming impossibly expensive. Think about this. A single Panther tank cost over 117,000 Reichsmarks, and that's without the gun or radio. Germany needed a new weapon, not another complex, cutting-edge Titan, but something cheap, easy to mass produce, and good enough to help stem the red tide. The answer wouldn't come from the famous design bureaus of Henschel or Porsche, but from a place nobody expected. So, facing tougher Allied tanks, Germany's first instinct was to do what they did best: go bigger. This led to the creation of the infamous tank-destroying Titans. You had the Nashorn, which mounted the phenomenal 88mm PaK 43 gun, the same one used on the Tiger II, on a chassis made from Panzer III and IV parts. It was a deadly sniper that could kill tanks from incredible distances, but its armor was paper thin. It was a sitting duck in any situation that wasn't a perfectly planned ambush. Then you have the Ferdinand, later called the Elephant. They built it on 91 Porsche Tiger chassis that had been rejected for the main Tiger program. It had frontal armor that was pretty much impenetrable, and that same killer 88mm gun. During the Battle of Kursk, they racked up terrifying kill counts, but they were a mechanical nightmare. Their complex electric drive systems constantly broke down, they were painfully slow, they had no machine gun for defense against infantry, and many were lost simply because they broke down and had to be abandoned by their crews. But the absolute peak of this obsession with bigger is better has to be the Jagdtiger. At 71 tons, it was the heaviest armored fighting vehicle to actually see service in the war. Its 250mm of frontal armor was immune to just about any Allied gun, and its monstrous 128mm cannon could knock out targets from miles away. On paper, it was the ultimate weapon. In reality, it was a disaster. The Jagdtiger was a logistical and mechanical train wreck. Its engine was nowhere near powerful enough for its immense weight, which led to constant engine and transmission failures. It guzzled fuel at a time when Germany's fuel supplies had all but dried up. It's estimated that for every single Jagdtiger knocked out by the enemy, 4 others were just abandoned or blown up by their own crews because they broke down or ran out of fuel. The vehicle was so heavy that if it got stuck, a single recovery vehicle couldn't even tow it. It took a Recovery Panther plus 2 heavy half-tracks just to budge a disabled Jagdtiger. Sure, they had some spectacular moments, like one unit that reportedly destroyed 25 US tanks outside Neustadt, but those moments were rare. The Jagdtiger's impact on the war was basically zero. There were too few of them, they were too unreliable, and they were too much of a headache to maintain. Germany's wonder weapons were failing. The path to a real solution didn't start with a brilliant new design. It started with an accident. On the night of November 26, 1943, an RAF bombing raid over Berlin drifted slightly off target. Instead of their primary objectives, a number of bombers dropped their payload right on the Alkett factory, a key facility churning out the Sturmgeschütz III assault gun, the Stug. And the Stug was Germany's absolute workhorse. It was their most produced armored vehicle and was credited with killing tens of thousands of enemy tanks. The bombing crippled Stug production, creating a huge and desperate gap in Germany's defenses. A new light tank destroyer was needed, and it was needed yesterday. The call went out for a design that was cheap, used existing parts, and was simple enough for Germany's battered industry to build in massive numbers. The answer came from the Czech firm BMM, which had a radical idea: build a new tank destroyer on the chassis of the old but famously reliable Panzer 38.T. The Panzer 38.T started life as a Czechoslovakian tank, the LT-VZ-38, that Germany adopted after occupying the country. By 1944, it was totally obsolete as a tank, but its chassis was a proven, dependable workhorse. Taking a little inspiration from a Romanian tank destroyer, engineers at BMM designed a brand new, fully enclosed fighting compartment to sit on a widened 38.T chassis. The design was all about pragmatism. The armor plates were welded and interlocked, and the front was a single 60mm plate sloped back at a sharp 60 degrees. That crazy slope gave it an effective armor thickness of around 120 millimeters. That's tougher than the front hull of a Tiger I, which is just incredible for a vehicle this small. Its main weapon was the dependable 75mm PAK 39/48 gun, the same gun used on later Stugs, which was more than enough to kill Shermans, Cromwells, and T-34s at normal combat ranges. But the design had some serious quirks. To cram everything into the tiny hull, the gun was mounted way off to the right. This made the inside incredibly cramped. The driver sat on the far left, completely blind to his right side. The gunner and loader were squished together, while the commander was stuck on the other side by himself, where he also had to operate the roof-mounted machine gun.
Reloading the main gun was a clumsy, awkward job for the loader, and trying to bail out in an emergency was a nightmare. It was an ergonomic disaster, but it was cheap and it could be built fast. The design was approved in December 1943, just a month after the factory bombing, and the first prototypes rolled out in January 1944. The Jagdpanzer 38, nicknamed the Hetzer, or Bader, was born. The Hetzer was a machine born from pure desperation, a mess of compromises and bad ergonomics. But as we're about to see, in the brutal defensive fighting of the late war, those flaws were often overshadowed by its surprising strengths. The story of its performance in combat is what earned this little tank hunter its lethal reputation. If you're enjoying this deep dive into armored warfare, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss what's coming next. We have a lot more stories just like this one. The first Hetzers hit the front lines in July 1944 and were thrown straight into the meat grinder of the Eastern Front. This was where Germany was constantly on the back foot, and the Hetzer's whole design philosophy was put to the ultimate test. This was not a vehicle for sweeping offensive attacks. Its gun couldn't traverse very far, and visibility was poor, making it a bad choice for a tank duel in the open. But it was brilliant at the one job it was designed for: ambush. Hetzer crews were taught one main thing: ambush. Find a good defensive spot, hide behind a wall, tuck into a ditch, or lurk at the edge of a forest, and wait. Its biggest advantage was its tiny profile. At just over 2 meters tall, the Hetzer was incredibly easy to hide. When it was hull down, with its body hidden behind a ridge, it presented an impossibly small target. German reports are full of praise for its ability to fire a few shots, quickly back away, and set up another ambush from a new spot. One report from the Eastern Front tells a perfect story. A group of 4 Hetzers engaged a massive Soviet JS-2 heavy tank from 1,200 meters. The powerful Soviet tank fired 10 shots at the lead Hetzer, which was dug in on a reverse slope. Every single shot missed, most likely because the Soviet gunner just couldn't get a good look at the tiny target. The Hetzers then used the terrain to get to the flank of the heavy tank and knocked it out with 6 shots. While its 75mm gun struggled to get through the front armor of the heaviest Soviet tanks, like that JS-2, it was deadly against the vast majority of Allied armor it came up against. And its own sloped front armor proved surprisingly tough, able to bounce shells from the 75mm guns on American Shermans and the 76mm guns on Soviet T-34s at typical combat distances. The sides, however, were a different story. With only 20mm of armor, getting flanked was a death sentence.
Success in a Hetzer really came down to the crew's skill and whether they stuck to those ambush tactics. A German bulletin from October 1944 was filled with glowing reports. One said, "The light Panzerjäger 38 has passed its test in fire. The crews are proud of this Jagdpanzer, and the infantry have faith in it." Another report claimed a single company of Hetzers destroyed 20 enemy tanks without losing a single one of their own. That's not to say it was invincible. When they were used improperly as assault guns, like during the Battle of the Bulge, losses were high. One report describes an attack where 9 Hetzers were lost after their infantry support vanished and they were caught out in the open. It was definitely a flawed machine, but when crews used it the way it was intended, it was remarkably deadly. It was the perfect tool for the desperate defensive war Germany was now fighting. So let's go back to that first question. Was the Hetzer really Germany's most lethal tank hunter? Well, if you define lethal as pure one-on-one killing power, then the answer is no. That title would probably go to the Jagdpanzer, a brilliant design that combined the Panther tank's mobility with the terrifying 88mm PaK-43 gun. A lot of experts would say the Jagdpanzer was the best overall tank destroyer of the war. But it was also complicated, expensive, and constant Allied bombing meant that only about 413 of them were ever built. Because the lethality of a weapon isn't just about its stats. In a total war, it's about availability, reliability, and cost. And on those terms, the Hetzer wins, hands down. Germany built over 2,800 Hetzers in the last year or so of the war. For every single Jagdpanzer that made it to the front, Germany built nearly 7 Hetzers. The Hetzer was mechanically reliable because it was based on a chassis that had been around for years. While the big cats, like the Jagdtiger, were constantly breaking down, the Hetzers kept fighting. It was cheap enough to be handed out in large numbers, replacing towed anti-tank guns and giving infantry units their own powerful mobile anti-tank weapon. By April 1945, there were nearly 500 operational Hetzers on the Eastern Front alone. A Jagdtiger could kill any tank on the battlefield, sure, but it rarely got the chance. It was a weapon defeated by its own weight and complexity. The Hetzer, on the other hand, was the definition of a good enough weapon. It was a pragmatic, mass-produced tool that put a capable gun in a small, well-protected, and reliable vehicle. In the final desperate year of the war, Germany didn't need more technically perfect but unavailable wonder weapons. It needed thousands of simple, dependable tank killers.
The Hetzer was the answer. It wasn't the best tank destroyer, but because it was actually there, on the battlefield, in numbers that mattered, it was the most effective. In the context of a failing war machine, it was the most lethal of them all. The Hetzer's story is the perfect reminder that in war, the flashiest, most advanced weapon isn't always the one that makes the biggest difference. Born from the ashes of a bombed-out factory and built on an old, outdated chassis, the Jagdpanzer 38 was the ultimate expression of late-war German pragmatism. It was flawed, it was cramped, it was a compromise in every sense of the word, but it was also the right weapon at exactly the right time. It proved that in a war of attrition, quantity has a quality all its own. The steel giants might get all the glory, but it was the small, humble Hetzer that delivered the most lethal sting.